I walked out one morning to find a full-blown wedding ceremony being set up in my backyard. Tables, chairs, a wedding arch, even a string quartet, all assembled without my knowledge. And right in the middle of it all was Karen, the HOA president, directing everyone like she owned the place. Her smug smile vanished when I pointed at the sprinkler system and turned the knob, but that wasn't water. That was fermented runoff from my composting system, and by the time the vows were said, the bride was crying, the guests were screaming, and Karen was threatening to sue. But let me tell you, this wasn't petty revenge. This was justice. And it started 2 months earlier when Karen tried to fine me for owning a shed. My name's Jake. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Austin, Texas. My wife Emily and I bought our house 5 years ago, and it was everything we wanted: a big yard, some privacy, and a simple HOA agreement that mostly promised to keep the lawns mowed and neighbors from going full Florida man. Or so we thought. Then came Karen. Now, Karen didn't just join the HOA. She embodied the HOA. Oversized sunglasses, a clipboard always in hand, a voice that carried 3 houses down, whether she was talking or yelling, mostly yelling. The trouble started when I built a tool shed in my backyard. Nothing fancy, just a weatherproof unit to store my mower, some lumber, and my composting equipment. Karen showed up the same day it was delivered, snapping photos through the chain link fence like she was casing a crime scene. "You'll be hearing from the HOA board," she said, smug as ever. "This violates Section 4.3b of the Aesthetics Clause." I asked what that meant. She didn't explain. But I did hear from the HOA board a few days later a $200 fine and an order to remove the unapproved structure. I appealed. I even presented the original HOA guidelines at the next meeting. Guess what? Sheds were allowed. Turns out, Karen had been using an older version of the HOA rules, one from a previous neighborhood she tried to micromanage before they kicked her out. The board sided with me, but Karen didn't take the loss well. That's when things started getting weird. First, my garbage bins disappeared. Then, my mailbox was mysteriously damaged, twice in 1 week. Next, a neighbor casually mentioned that Karen had been asking around about whether my compost system had a permit. I laughed it off until I got a citation from the city code enforcement. Turns out someone filed an anonymous complaint. But here's the thing, I do have permits. My compost system is perfectly legal, odor-controlled, and actually benefits the local community garden. So, I showed the officer the paperwork. He even complimented how clean my setup was. Another win. Another silent tantrum from Karen. 2 months later, I took a weekend trip with Emily to see her parents. We came home Sunday night, ready to relax. That's when I noticed the grass in the yard looked trampled. I stepped into the backyard and saw footprints, hundreds of them, drag marks in the grass. Something was off. It wasn't until I checked the security footage that I saw what had happened. Karen had unlocked the back gate, marched in with 3 event planners, and hosted a wedding. In my yard. No note, no warning, no permission. The footage showed guests informal where walking across my lawn, setting up folding chairs, placing flower arrangements on my shed, and using my hose to fill decorative fountains. They even used my back porch for wedding photos. I was stunned, furious, confused. Who does that? Then I remembered a conversation I overheard a week earlier. Karen had mentioned her niece was getting married locally, and she was handling the venue. Apparently, the venue was my private property. I stormed over to Karen's house the next morning. She didn't even look surprised when she opened the door. "Oh, Jake, how was your trip?" I didn't even greet her. "Did you host a wedding in my yard?" She blinked once, twice, then smiled. "It was just for a few hours. You weren't using it, and your lawn is so bland it needed purpose." She said it like I should be flattered. I told her if she didn't pay for damages and send a formal apology, I'd be calling the police. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she snapped. "This is a community. Sometimes we share. If you had been more cooperative with the HOA, maybe I would have invited you." I walked away before I did something stupid, but I didn't walk away from the fight. That evening, as I sat on my back porch staring at the trampled grass and cigarette butts left behind, I remembered something. My compost tank. Technically, it's a gray water system, a mixture of food waste runoff, leaf mulch, and garden water collected from various sources. Harmless, but incredibly smelly if left to sit too long. I had 2 weeks' worth saved up in the overflow barrel, and I had a sprinkler system directly connected to it for controlled fertilization. Suddenly, an idea formed. A glorious, righteous idea. I pulled up the security footage and saved every clip of the trespassing wedding. Then I installed a motion-activated camera and reprogrammed the sprinkler timer. And then I waited. 3 days later, Karen knocked on my door. "I'll be using your yard again this Saturday. We're doing a photo shoot for the newlyweds." I said nothing, just nodded. "Thanks for being reasonable," she added, smug again. "Maybe you're finally learning to be a good neighbor." "Oh, Karen, you have no idea what I've learned." Saturday came. I stayed out of sight. The second wave of guests arrived just past noon. Dressed in white, the couple beaming, a photographer clicking away. And then Karen walked across my lawn like it was her personal catwalk. At precisely 12:15 p.m., the sprinklers activated. A light missed at first, just enough to draw confused looks. Then the smell hit. One bridesmaid gagged. A groomsman slipped. The photographer yelled. The bride screamed. It was beautiful. Karen shrieked as the water hit her blouse, now clinging to her body as she tried to run. Her heels stuck in the soggy grass. The guests scrambled for the fence, their pastel outfits, now stained with organic horror. By the time it shut off, my yard looked like a battlefield. And I had it all on video. Karen showed up at my door 2 hours later, covered in mud and righteous fury. "You think that was funny? You're going to jail, you psychopath." I calmly pulled up the footage. "Want to watch the first wedding again? Maybe show it to a judge?" She went pale. I told her if she ever set foot on my property again, I'd press charges for trespassing and illegal event hosting. She sputtered something about community and shared spaces, but I reminded her, our property lines are legally recorded. And now, so is she. That night, she left a typed formal complaint on my doorstep accusing me of assault via compost. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. The next HOA meeting was legendary. Karen tried to turn the board against me. "He weaponized his yard," she shrieked. "He ambushed innocent people." I calmly showed the footage, both weddings, the damage, her gate unlocking, the trespass. One board member laughed so hard she dropped her pen. Another just muttered, "Karen, seriously?" Karen was voted off the board that night. Unanimously. She stormed out, swearing revenge, but no one followed her. It's been 6 months. My yard's fully restored. Emily and I even hosted a real wedding for a friend with proper invitations and zero compost surprises. Karen sold her house last month. Rumor is she's trying to start another HOA in a different suburb. God help them. As for me, I still have the footage, and I still smile every time I walk past my sprinkler system, because sometimes justice smells like old lettuce and garden runoff. A week after the sprinkler incident, I thought it was over, until I got a knock on my door from Carl, a board member who'd always seemed neutral. "You need to see this," he said, holding a manila folder. Inside, copies of HOA meeting notes not filed in the official system. Karen's personal records, detailed logs of neighbors she didn't like with notes like, "Yard too messy, might fine, owns truck, possible code, violation." Jake, compost nut, revenge-minded. Revenge-minded? She had dossiers on at least 6 people. Carl said he found them in the back of the HOA storage room when helping clean out files after Karen's removal. Stuff she kept hidden. None of this had gone through the proper channels. It meant Karen had been running a shadow HOA behind everyone's back. And worse, there was a line under my name, "Find leverage before June. Look into property boundaries." She had been trying to take part of my yard legally. But how? I did some digging of my own. 3 weeks before the wedding incident, a surveyor had quietly been through the neighborhood. I thought it was someone doing regular utilities work. Turns out, Karen had hired them to remeasure property lines. The plan? claim part of my backyard had been improperly annexed when the neighborhood was developed. If she could prove it, the HOA could seize it under a common space clause buried deep in the original charter. It wouldn't hold up in court unless I didn't know about it. She was setting up the wedding as a trap, a way to publicly use the space and claim it was already being used for the community. And I had walked right into it by leaving town that weekend. She wasn't done with me. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the county zoning office. Apparently, someone filed a permit request to build a community gazebo directly on the back section of my yard. The file listed my address, but the applicant? Not me. You already know who it was. Karen had forged my name, listed herself as the HOA liaison, and fast-tracked the request using an expired notary stamp from her own files. This wasn't petty HOA drama anymore. It was fraud. Emily wanted me to call a lawyer immediately. I was ready to, but first I decided to do something different. I wanted to know how deep the rabbit hole went. So I called the permit office and asked them a simple question. Can I get a copy of the original submission and any attached maps? When I opened the scanned file, my jaw dropped. Karen had submitted a redrawn map of my property. She'd literally traced the lines with a Sharpie, shifting the boundary 15 feet to the left. We were dealing with a full-blown HOA con artist, and I had just gotten proof. That's when Sheila showed up. She's 65, walks her chihuahua every morning, and always waves politely. I never thought she had much interest in HOA politics, but she pulled me aside one day and whispered, "I know what Karen's doing. I've been watching her." Turns out, Sheila had a front row seat to Karen's reign of terror and had quietly documented everything. Hidden cameras, emails, HOA meeting recordings. Sheila had it all. "I never trusted her," she said. "And when I saw her directing wedding guests into your yard, I started saving everything." She handed me a flash drive. On it, footage of Karen rehearsing the wedding setup a day before the event, talking to vendors like she owned the house. She even said, "He's never home on weekends. He'll never know." I did know now, and I was building a case that might end Karen's HOA career permanently. We met at a local diner. I explained everything. The forged permit, the redrawn map, the illegal wedding, the new attempt to seize part of my yard. When I showed him the footage, "This is slam dunk stuff," he said. "We're not just talking about trespassing. This is attempted property theft and impersonation." He drafted a cease and desist letter that same day, plus a formal legal warning to the HOA board. We hand-delivered both. 2 days later, Karen retaliated. She posted a flyer on every door in the neighborhood. "I.S. your neighbor's secretly recording you?" Complete with a blurry photo of me holding a hose. She wasn't just spiraling, she was trying to turn the entire community against me. And from the looks of the next HOA meeting agenda, she had backup. 3 days after Karen's neighborhood flyer campaign, I noticed something odd. Several neighbors stopped waving at me. Some even crossed the street to avoid me. Emily told me Mrs. Belcher, the one who usually begged us for tomatoes from our garden, had posted a cryptic comment on Nextdoor. "Some people spy on their neighbors and want to sue the whole community." Karen's poison was working. Then I heard from Carl again. She held a private HOA meeting, he said, didn't notify half the board, just her supporters. "They're trying to call an emergency vote to strip your member in good standing status," which meant, if successful, I could lose my voting rights as a resident, which would let them pass anything against me. Carl slipped me a copy of the fake community improvement plan they were planning to propose. It wasn't just about my yard anymore. Karen was pushing to absorb 4 surrounding properties into a common recreational zone, all homes that had clashed with her in the past. I wasn't the only target. That night, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was my security app, motion detected by the back gate. I flipped open the feed. Nothing. Then again, movement. A figure in a hoodie ducking behind my compost bins. When I zoomed in on the footage, my stomach dropped. They were holding a clipboard. Someone was casing my yard again. Next morning, I found surveyors' flags planted in the dirt, barely noticeable. Bright pink, with the initials KH written in Sharpie on the plastic. Karen had sent someone again, or maybe come herself, trying to establish the fake boundary lines she drew in her bogus map. This time, I saved everything. Photos, video, timestamps. And I filed a police report. The officer looked at the video and asked, "Did this person ever have official access to your land?" I laughed. "She hosted a wedding here without asking." The next HOA board meeting was public, and I came prepared. I printed copies of Karen's forged gazebo application, the redrawn property map, the wedding photos, and the footage Sheila had collected. Right before the meeting started, I quietly dropped copies in front of every attending member. Karen walked in late, wearing sunglasses indoors and holding a Starbucks cup like she was untouchable. Then she saw the stack of papers on the table. Her face turned ghost white. I stood during community comment and asked a single question. How does the HOA feel about a fake gazebo permit filed using my name? Dead silence. She tried to pivot, talking about community beautification efforts, but it was too late. I had one more trick. I announced I'd donated part of my property as a native plant preserve, legally protected under state wildlife law. Meaning, any future HOA development attempt could trigger an environmental lawsuit. And Karen? She had just tried to build a gazebo there. After the meeting disaster, Karen vanished for a few days. But her supporters were busy. Two of them, Mr. Ford and Lynn Marks, started going door to door pushing a petition to remove disruptive members from the HOA. They weren't just targeting me anymore. Carl, Sheila, and two others were also on the list. "This isn't about community," Sheila said. "Karen's trying to consolidate power before someone forces a legal audit." I started getting anonymous notes in my mailbox. Stuff like, "Keep suing and we'll make life hard." "No one wants your ugly preserve." "Sell your land and leave." Then someone egged my truck. That's when Emily looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm done playing defense. Let's take her down for real." With Carl and Sheila's help, I compiled every piece of evidence into a master file. Fake permits, trespassing footage, secret meeting recordings, her handwritten hit list of targeted neighbors. Then we launched a website, hoatruth.org, an anonymous upload that any resident could visit. Within 24 hours, the site got over 300 visits. By the weekend, it had over 1,100 views, nearly the entire neighborhood. Suddenly, the silence broke. Neighbors started speaking out. One woman came forward saying Karen falsified her dog's breed to fine her for having a dangerous pet. Another said Karen tried to bill her for community fence repairs that never happened. Karen tried to shut the site down, sending a cease and desist via an AOL email. We posted it on the homepage. "Still using AOL? No, wonder your plans fell apart," someone commented. Now the tide was turning. But we hadn't won yet, because Karen had one last card, and it involved something buried deep in the original HOA deed. The first time I heard about the deed clause, I thought it was just neighborhood lore. The kind of thing that gets passed around at block parties. Somewhere in the original HOA charter, there's a clause that gives one resident insane power. Turns out, it's very real. Carl found it after digging through the original development papers, scanned on microfilm at the county archives. We met at a diner, and he slid the printout across the table. One section highlighted in yellow: should the HOA board fall below quorum or lose legal standing due to internal misconduct, power may temporarily revert to the original landowner or their direct successor. I blinked. The original landowner? As in... Carl nodded slowly. As in you. That's when I remembered my grandfather bought this land before the subdivision even existed. When the developers built the neighborhood, they leased easement rights through our family. Karen had no idea, but if the HOA imploded, I might be the one who inherits its authority. Karen wasn't blind. She saw the site going viral. She saw neighbors slowly turning against her. So she did what any cornered HOA dictator would do. She tried to speed up a vote to dissolve the current board and install a temporary emergency committee. Handpicked by her, of course. She gave residents just 24 hours notice and posted the meeting on the HOA bulletin board. Only there, classic HOA dirty move. But Carl got a tip from a resident who saw Karen walking house to house with a binder. She's telling people to vote is about neighborhood safety. We knew what she was doing. So we made our move. That night, right before the meeting, I showed up with 10 neighbors who were on the fence about me. We handed out flyers with full screenshots of the forged documents, photos of the nighttime trespassing, and a QR code linking to HOAtruth.org. Karen walked in to find over 40 people staring at her like she was a defendant in a courtroom. And we weren't done yet. After the disastrous meeting, I got a text from Carl. We found her thumb drive. Apparently, while Karen stormed out of the meeting, one of her loyalists accidentally dropped a bag. Inside, a thumb drive labeled private HOA only. Carl plugged it in. It was password protected. But the folder name? Votes, fines, evidence. Carl had a cousin in cybersecurity. They ran it through a password recovery tool. 30 minutes later, we were in. Inside were decades of shady HOA records. Fine amounts doubled from the official reports, secret photos of neighbors' backyards, private complaints she'd never shared with the board, and a spreadsheet titled HOA Takeover Plan Phase 3 Final Push. It detailed how she planned to dissolve the HOA board, rezone the Greenbelt, and install a private rental pavilion where her wedding had taken place. Meaning, this was never about power. It was about money. Karen's spreadsheet broke, everything wide open. She had already started negotiations with a private event company. The plan was to convert part of the neighborhood's open land, including the piece she tried to steal from me, into a rentable venue for weddings, parties, even private HOA retreats. The HOA would collect the fees. Karen would take a 15% organizer's cut, all without telling a single homeowner. Emily was furious. She literally tried to turn our backyard into her side hustle. The worst part, the agreement was already signed by the company, contingent only on HOA approval. Karen had planned to force the vote before anyone caught on. Now that we had the contract file, we printed it out, stuck it on every mailbox in the neighborhood, and added it to the front page of HOAtruth.org. That weekend, Karen's house got hit with something poetic. A giant inflatable wedding arch appeared on her front lawn, spray painted with the words, HOA Karen's Rent-A-Yard, 15% grift fee. The morning after the arch prank, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Turner? This is Detective Molina with the County Fraud Division. We received a report regarding falsified HOA permits and property line manipulation. Can we meet in person? Carl had filed the complaint. They had opened an official investigation. I told the detective everything from the forged permit to the false zoning application. I handed over photos, the drive, even a printed copy of Karen's Phase 3 spreadsheet. He nodded slowly and said, "We've had our eye on this HOA for a while. You're not the only one who's complained." Then he dropped the bombshell. We believe Karen may be tied to similar fraud in 2 other neighborhoods. She changes her last name every few years. Karen wasn't even Karen's real name. Now, this wasn't just neighborhood drama. This was a pattern, and it might have been going on for years. The day after Detective Molina's visit, Karen vanished. No Facebook updates. No HOA emails. No angry porch pacing. Then a legal notice showed up in everyone's mailbox. Not from the HOA, from Karen's new attorney. My client, Ms. K. Whitaker, disputes all allegations made against her by residents of Oak Ridge Estates and reserves her right to pursue defamation damages. Any attempts to enter her property, post signage, or tamper with HOA records will be considered criminal harassment. I couldn't believe it. Karen's response to being exposed wasn't retreat, it was to threaten to sue the neighborhood. I called Carl. What do we do? He laughed. We welcome the lawsuit. Discovery will force her to reveal everything. But we didn't even have to wait that long. The next morning, I got an anonymous tip in my inbox. Karen isn't just a scammer. She's a serial grifter. I have proof. Meet me where the wedding tent was. No name, no number, But something told me this was real. The man waiting for me by the old tent poles looked like someone who'd seen too much HOA drama for one lifetime. He introduced himself as James. Used to be on the HOA board, until Karen rearranged things. He handed me a black binder. Old, dusty, stuffed with papers, photos, and letters. That's every time she's done this. Different neighborhoods, different names, same scam. Inside were photos of Karen under 3 different aliases, each tied to a different HOA scheme, some involving illegal zoning, others involving kickbacks from contractors. James pointed to a familiar logo on one of the invoices, the same event company from her wedding stunt. Every time she gets close to being caught, he said she resigns, changes towns, reinvents herself. My blood went cold. Why are you giving this to me? He looked toward Karen's house. Because you're the one who finally fought back. We scanned the entire binder and uploaded it to HOAtruth.org. Then Carl had an idea. He clipped together security footage, photos of the fake wedding, Karen's contract files, and James's binder into a short video titled, Exposed. The woman who scammed 3 HOAs and held a wedding in my yard. The next morning, it hit 30,000 views. 2 hours later, a local news van pulled into the neighborhood. By the end of the day, our site had crashed from traffic. Karen? Still silent. Curtains drawn. Cars gone. Emily saw someone sneak out of her house that night in a hoodie and toss something in the trash. It was a broken laptop. We handed it over to the detective, but it didn't end there. A week later, a new face showed up at the HOA office. He wore a county badge, and he brought a warrant. When Detective Molina returned with his team, they weren't just there for Karen's files. They were there for financial records. Turns out, Karen had been running 2 sets of books, one for the official HOA reports, and another connected to a private business account under the name W Event Services. Guess what the W stood for? Whitaker. They discovered tens of thousands of dollars in mysterious withdrawals and event deposits. Every time someone paid a fine or a permit fee, a slice was rerouted. Even worse, she'd been billing vendors for phantom services and collecting under-the-table commissions. The detective turned to us with a look I won't forget. This isn't just fraud. This is organized embezzlement. Karen was no HOA nutcase. She was running a small criminal enterprise, but we still didn't know her real name. Until Carl made a call that changed everything. Carl reached out to a lawyer who specialized in HOA whistleblowing cases. She'd worked with law enforcement on HOA corruption rings before. When she saw Karen's photos, she froze. That's not Kay Whitaker. That's Sandra Lorraine Matthews. She was indicted in 2014 for wire fraud. Fled before the trial. An active warrant was still out on her. She'd been living under fake names, hopping from state to state, always targeting gated communities with weak oversight. She knows the system better than anyone, and she knows when to vanish. But this time, she made one mistake. She left too much behind. As we helped the detective catalog the evidence, one final folder on Karen's old laptop caught Carl's eye. It was password locked. Just one word. We tried Karen. Whitaker. Even wedding. Nothing. Then Emily typed, power. It unlocked, and inside was a list of names and neighborhoods, all marked. Next targets. The next targets document was chilling. It wasn't just a few neighborhoods. There were dozens, each with the HOA name, number of residents, average home value, a column labeled potential with notes like weak board, high dues, owner infighting Karen, or Sandra had been profiling entire neighborhoods like a predator stalking her prey. We saw notes for one community not 10 miles from us. Carl's eyes widened. My brother lives there. Worse yet, the list was dated just 3 weeks ago. She hadn't just scammed Oak Ridge Estates. She was planning her next con before this one even finished. Molina immediately passed it to the feds. If she's left the state, they'll need this. But before they could act, we got another anonymous message. No sender, just a location. Meet me at the old tennis court. Bring the binder. The tennis court had long been abandoned, cracked concrete, and weeds pushing through the net poles. A figure waited there, under a flickering light. He wore a gray windbreaker and spoke before I could say a word. "You've stirred something bigger than Karen. You need to be careful." I didn't recognize him, but Carl swore he looked familiar. He handed us a flash drive. "Take this to the detective, and don't copy it. It's traceable." Then he was gone. We rushed home, popped in the drive, and braced ourselves. Inside were videos, surveillance footage from Karen's time at other HOAs, hidden cameras, meetings, even phone calls. In one, she was talking to someone named Colby about rerouting landscaping fees through a shell company. Another showed her bribing a former board member. This isn't just her. It's a network. Carl looked like he'd seen a ghost. We're not chasing a scammer anymore. We're chasing a syndicate. Carl had a theory. The HOA scams weren't just about money. They were testing grounds. Each success gave them more power, more reach, more data. He pieced together the names from the videos and old records. A pattern emerged. Fake companies funneling funds through the same banks, repeat names as vendors or legal consultants, a central contact labeled only as R. Greystone. We Googled the name. Nothing. Until Carl checked deeds and land sales. That name popped up as a silent partner in over 18 real estate transactions, all in neighborhoods with troubled HOAs. They weren't just stealing dues. They were taking over the neighborhoods. And Oak Ridge was listed as a Tier 1 test zone. We were just the start. By now, our little operation had grown bigger than we imagined. Molina brought in federal agents. 3 SUVs rolled into the neighborhood one morning, unmarked but clearly serious. They took the flash drive, the binder, Karen's laptop, everything. An agent pulled Carl and me aside. "You may have just cracked the lid on one of the largest HOA fraud rings in the country. They'd been investigating similar patterns across 4 states, but couldn't connect the dots. Karen, Sandra, is a middle node. We're after the top." That night, Carl stayed up pulling old HOA meeting videos. At 2:17 a.m., he called me, panicked. "You need to see this." He sent a screen grab. There, sitting quietly in the back row of a meeting in a Florida neighborhood, was R. Greystone. Greystone wasn't a name. It was an alias, possibly used by more than one person. In the video, we couldn't make out their face clearly. Wide brim hat, large sunglasses, sitting just out of frame. We sent it to the feds. They confirmed it. This wasn't their first sighting of Greystone. They'd appeared in 8 different neighborhood videos under different names and guises, always close to someone getting scammed. But here's the kicker, none of them were the same person. Greystone was a title, a rotating role in a group calling themselves the Covenant, an underground circle of elite fraudsters who specialized in infiltrating suburban infrastructure. HOAs, zoning boards, property development firms, and flipping control from within. Karen wasn't an outlier. She was an initiate. And her Oak Ridge wedding stunt? Just her entry test. We thought Karen Sandra was gone for good. But 5 days after the feds left, something strange happened. A moving truck pulled up to the old brick house at the end of the cul-de-sac, Karen's former headquarters. Out stepped a quiet woman with jet black hair, oversized sunglasses, and a tiny dog in her arms. Nobody thought much of it, just another homeowner moving in. But Carl, ever the skeptic, took a quick photo of the moving truck's plates. Later that evening, he ran them through a public records check. They matched a vehicle from one of the surveillance clips in a different state. Same setup, same brand of truck, same fake moving company. This wasn't some new neighbor. This was a replacement, another plant, sent to quietly re-establish control. We called Agent Molinaro. He confirmed it. They're rotating in new operatives, clearing traces, testing to see who's still paying attention. Just when we thought it was over, it had only shifted into a new phase. That night, just past midnight, I received a single text message. No name, no number, just this, "You made it fun, but this isn't over." Attached was a photo of me and Carl on our porch, taken from across the street. That day, they were watching us, and the Covenant wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Thanks for watching. This story was inspired by real HOA nightmares that get swept under the rug, but not here. If this kept you on the edge of your seat, like the video so more people can see what these fake HOA scammers are doing behind the scenes. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more real-life drama, revenge, and unthinkable HOA plots coming your way. This is HOA Nightmare, where we don't just tell stories, we expose them. See you in the next one.